right, welcome back to another chapter of Book Eaters Podcast. I am April Freeman.
And I'm Michelle Karsk.
And Iris Arroyo. And for this chapter, I am trying to maintain my composure because we will be talking about one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. It is Robin Hobbs, the Farseer Trilogy. Now, this is a world called Realm of the Elderlings. There are, I think, a total of 5 trilogies, but we are only going to be covering the first trilogy, which is the Farseer Trilogy. And Michelle,
Yes,
who was defenseless against the onslaught of my begging, agreed in spite of all of the other books out there that she needs to be focused on. I haven't heard her thoughts, but that is what we're diving into today.
Yes, and I have completed the Farseer Trilogy. I did not read it. I'd listened to it, as is my way. And I did enjoy it. I thought that it was pretty good. It was not as good as the Wheel of Time.
That's my number 2.
And the reason that I liked it less than the Wheel of Time is because in the Wheel of Time, there are a multitude of characters that I get to see things from their perspective, and I get to see what's happening all over the kingdom. And in this trilogy, it's all from one perspective.
Well, that's why I'm excited that you have decide to continue on the journey into the next trilogy, because that series does have multiple POVs. But let's not get too far into it.
Okay.
Just wanted to kind of set it up. We're going to start with our drinks, as is our way.
As our tradition.
For this week, I wanted to do a Realm of the Elderlings inspired cocktail. And really the only drink references in the book are brandy. There's cheap brandy.
They drink a lot in the book.
There's
constant drink and eating of food.
So in the first trilogy, that I know they talk about blackberry brandy.
Mm-hmm.
And later they talk about a very beautiful brandy, an apricot brandy.
That's right, because the blackberry brandy is
cheap,
only good because it's inexpensive.
But what's interesting, though, is the quality of drinks changes through the series based on the characters. So obviously, the main character of the Farseer trilogy is Fitzchivalry, and he is a abandoned child, making, minimum oversight by the adults in his life. Obviously, not going to have a lot of resources, so he would.
But I feel like at 6, he was already drinking.
Yeah, I don't think that's too unusual for like medieval kind of.
It didn't seem unusual for the setting of the book, for the universe or the world that it's in. It seemed like everyone was drinking all of the time.
Right. I think that's true in our history too, because I think, water wasn't always safe to drink. And so, like, if you've ever been reading a book and they refer to something as a small beer, that means very, very weak beer that
Kinderbier
was pretty much just the replacement for water, because the fermentation and everything would make it safe to drink. In the book, they talk about this beautiful brandy from Sandsedge, apricot brandy, and the only apricot brandies that I could find are more like liqueurs, where they're like sickeningly sweet. Don't want to be closed-minded, but since they were like $6.99 a bottle, I'm assuming they weren't great quality.
I mean, I think that'd be on par, though, with what we're currently managing.
If you were
in the book, right?
Right. Well, if it was blackberry, absolutely. But I'm trying to bring, like, if you could hear the way they describe the apricot brandy, trust me, people, you would want to drink that magical elixir yourself. With that in mind, I put that together with a sling, which that's a very old cocktail. If you've ever heard, like, the Singapore sling, I think is the most common, or a gin sling. And I didn't know exactly what sling meant.
I've never
so
heard that before.
I looked it up. You've never heard of a Singapore sling?
No.
Oh, well, so I have heard of it, but I didn't know what the sling part was. And so it is basically just a spirit that has been sweetened and had water added to it. That's a sling.
Oh.
And I knew I needed to keep it simple, because to get the apricot flavor, I was going to have to add a liqueur. I've got a French brandy. Actually, I went with cognac, because brandy is like a spirit distilled from wine. Mm-hmm. Cognac is distilled from champagne.
Oh,
champagne. So this is cognac, and then apricot liqueur for the sweetener, and then just a little bit of water to help cut it. Oh, and it also has honey from my friend Karen's hive. So if Karen ever listens, thank you for your generous contribution to this.
I mean, I had some of the honey earlier, and it's so good. It's like molasses almost. It's like sweet and that dark sort of
it's
flavor.
Definitely, it's her
delicious.
Best jar yet, and you can taste the bee love in it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll take our first sip, and then we will dive on in. Now, you're going to want to sip it
smooth. Way smooth.
Thank you.
I mean, you're saying it's dangerous.
It is
I
deceptive.
can see that.
It's delicious.
So the water is what keeps it from giving you that brandy burn, you know?
Oh,
Like
that's
when
the sling. It slings it down your throat. I get it now.
yes.
So
Oh, I never thought of that, but yeah. You can also do a hot sling like a hot toddy, but I wasn't sure how to make that happen, so we just have it on ice.
good. All right. That's delicious.
Mhm. All
I'm
right.
gonna drink that slow.
All right, so let's dive in, Miss Michelle.
Okay.
Now, I did read the book. I also listened to the audiobook.
Oh, you did both.
I did both. It was one of those things where I was so caught up in the story that I needed to be progressing at all times. So when I was home, I read the book, and when I was in the car, I listened to
How
the
do you
audiobook.
manage that? Because I would imagine, like for me, whatever I'm using to read the audio or listen to the audiobook manages where I'm at, what place I'm at. But are you jumping? Like, how do you know where you are in the book to go to the actual hard book?
I just swipe 45 seconds, or if I know I stopped at a particular chapter, I'll just jump to that chapter. But yes, there is a whole like ritual when I first get into the car.
Okay.
I get my GPS going so that I can avoid traffic if I need to. I get my audiobook 30 seconds
Right.
into where I left off so that I can kind of get the momentum again. And then that's it. I could drive and drive and drive and drive, and traffic will not bother me at all. In
Same.
fact, I hope it's a little long this morning because I'd like to get through 2 chapters. So, yeah.
But then later when you read the book, because you're reading the book and you're listening at the same time, like do you have to go, you just look where you are in the app and then go to the book?
No, it's much easier for me to find where I need to be in a book. It's much easier to flip through pages really quick.
Oh, okay.
But I oftentimes find myself rereading what I listen to because, like we've talked about, I absorb it more if I'm reading it.
Right.
So if there was like a really like, oh, was there a clue just given away? Let me analyze this little section. Or especially like names, a lot of times listening to them, I need to see how they're spelled. All right, so let's start with just sort of questions specific to this trilogy. Give a little plot synopsis.
Of the trilogy in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little boy. Well, they tell us
Let me
who
stop
his
you for
dad
1
is,
second.
right?
In case you haven't picked up on it, there are spoilers ahead.
Oh yeah.
So if you have not read the book, you might want to put a pin in this and come back, listen to it another
A
time.
bookmark, if you will.
If you don't care about such things, well, first of all, just prepare yourself because by the end of this podcast, you're already going to have added it to a wish list or a shopping cart. You're going to want to read this book. Okay, proceed.
So, but he is a bastard. They find out that he is the king's bastard, or not the king, the king in waiting's bastard, and someone brings him to the keep,
Yes.
or what have you, and says, "We're done with this boy. You take care of him now. He's yours." When the king in waiting finds out about him, he basically just abdicates from the throne and then like runs away, and we never see or hear from him again, really at all. And then his stable master ends up raising this kid. Okay, so this is the thing too about this book is it's all character development, very little story. So the first book, in fact, like almost nothing happens. It felt to me like I just know about this boy's daily life, what he ate for breakfast, what he ate for lunch. There's a lot of food references.
Right, and that is probably a common criticism is that it didn't seem slow to me, but that is a common criticism. So just to kind of go back to, let's talk about the world. So this is the 6 duchies.
Right.
The king is King Shrewd. The king in waiting is Chivalry. He has a brother named Verity and a half brother named Regal. And when Fitz grows up in the Mountain Kingdom, and when he's 6 years old, his grandfather delivers him to Buckkeep, is the castle where the king lives, and says, he's your problem now, and he leaves him there. And oddly, the boy doesn't remember his birth name, doesn't really remember anything.
I should say that we never find that out in the end of the series either.
Correct.
And I was kind of irritated.
Well,
because I was like, no, like you're not even ever going to tell me because now all that information is forgotten.
There's a lot of, you're just going to have to wait.
Never going to know.
You're just going to have to wait. So the story is told from the point of view of Fitz, right. The boy, and as an adult. So he's telling sort of like his memoirs.
Right.
And he's explaining that he doesn't really, the earliest that he remembers is this memory of being dropped off at the castle. And for a long time, he's only called boy. And his father, Chivalry, is away from the kingdom. He does a lot of diplomatic stuff for the realm. And so no one there, they just see him as Chivalry has a bastard, and he's supposed to be like this really like upstanding, decent, wholesome.
And then because he abdicates, they will blame him too a little bit. Like,
right.
Because you've abdicated, now we don't have him anymore. This is great.
And he abdicated because he was so honorable and he felt like he didn't live up to his name.
So I always thought it was because the wife got sick is why he abdicated, because Patience was ill. And they said that she was ill because she was so upset about the fact that he had a bastard.
I think it was a combination of things. And I'm not sure how much was revealed in the first trilogy, but
I mean, we get to know Patience later, and that doesn't really check out from what we know of her.
Mm-hmm. And so let's say this too. So similar to A Song of Ice and Fire, kingdoms have surnames that they use for bastard children, like from Rivers or Jon Snow.
Right.
So similarly, in Realm of the Elderlings, Fitz is a common name for a bastard. So being named Fitz Chivalry means he's Chivalry's bastard. So that's the name he eventually ends up with. He's given into the care of Burrick, who is the stable master, as Michelle, too. But he's not just the stable master. He was Chivalry's man in waiting, like his right arm.
King's man.
But then when Chivalry abdicates, he's now kind of out of favor at court.
So and also he got into that fight with some sort of critter and jacked up his leg.
Yeah, he was in a boar, a wild boar.
So, and that happened like right before that, because first his leg gets wounded because he jumped in front of the boar to save Chivalry. So he sacrifices his leg for Chivalry, and then
Chivalry just is like,
he's
gone.
like, take care of my brat, I'm out.
And Berg is a old bachelor. He doesn't really know how to take care of a child, so he treats Fitz a lot like he does his dogs and horses, and loves him in his own way, but is not the most attentive to the emotional needs, just sort of the, feed him and, make sure he takes a bath every now and then. And Fitz is sort of unattended. He gets down to Buckkeep Town and he makes some friends with a ragtag group of kids, but mostly has a very free life until one day King Shrewd recognizes that having a bastard that is, a descendant of the king who abdicated could throw some chaos into who's going to inherit.
Right.
And so he quickly, to a young, impressionable child, is able to win that loyalty. Mm-hmm. Then Fitz is sort of given an apprenticeship, which is, we haven't even said the name of
Assassin's Apprentice.
Yeah, the name of the first book is Assassin's Apprentice. So he is given over to Shade or Chade, different pronunciations there, always said Chade. He's given over to Chade, the king's assassin, to be trained as an assassin. And Chade also becomes a very...
I think that it's Shade. Because in the book, everyone's name means something. Chivalry and Regal and Shrewd. And the whole first 3 minutes of the book, which I loved, talks about how important naming things are. Which is why I think it's Shade, because he was sort of like a shadow in the background, and he's provided shade for Fitz because he took care of him and sheltered him and trained him and whatever. So I think that his name is Shade. I don't think that it would be Shade, because Shade doesn't mean anything.
So I think his name was meant to evoke that shady, shadowy thing. But I don't. Well, we'll just have to. Why wouldn't they have spelled it? Everything else was spelled correctly.
I don't hear how it's spelled because I listened to it.
So this might be a good poll for our listeners. In any case, the idea is that people born into noble families are traditionally given names of virtues in the hopes that they will embody those virtues. So let's talk about who you think fit their names and who didn't, if any. And there is some question about whether or not giving a child that name automatically means they'll get that, because there is supposed to be a little magic in the royal blood. So we have Shrewd, King Shrewd. Definitely.
He was pretty shrewd.
He's a shrewd motherfucker.
I thought so, yeah.
Verity.
What does Verity even mean?
Truth. It means truth.
Oh, yeah, that checks out.
Yep. Chivalry. Undecided about him.
We don't know that much about him.
He's a shadow.
And what we do know about him is not great. We know what his perception was, but then
he seems like a sanctimonious bastard to me.
Right, that's what people say. But then he did stuff like isn't he the one that cursed Galen? Right?
He didn't.
He broke Galen, right?
Skill commanded him, yeah.
Right, and Galen was pretty fucked up because.
But he did it by accident. He didn't mean to.
Okay, so that's what we know. We know that he fucked up Galen. We know that he had a bastard kid that he abandoned. We know that he maybe fell off a horse and died. We know that he took Barrett's girl.
Michelle is not feeling chivalry.
I mean, I don't know anything, like all the things I know about Silver, the book paints him to be like this great guy, but I don't see any deeds he's done that's great. Like I'm a show me, don't tell me kind of girl. And what they showed me about Chivalry is not good.
Okay. What about Regal?
Regal's a piece of shit. I did not like that kid at all.
He did have a regal bearing. He definitely took that.
He reminded me of like a spoiled frat boy.
Definitely.
But he was also super good with people, right?
Because he was smarmy, yeah.
So it wasn't even that he was smarmy. It was like he was
charismatic,
and people liked him a lot. People followed him. The ladies followed him. The guy, people followed him. Like he was an asshole, sure, and he did terrible things. And I don't like him as a character at all. I'm glad that he got what he got at the end. But people liked him.
All right, so in the series, in this world, there's magic. And there's basically two types of magic. There is the wit, which is beast magic. Oh. Also called the old blood. And it is basically people who are witted can become one with animals.
Also, it's more than that, though. They can
communicate.
Talk, but they can also sense if something is alive.
Right. They can sense that they're around.
They can sense their feelings, and they can push things at them. They can hurt them with their mind, so they can push them back. Compel them. Yes. So having wit seems pretty cool.
So that's their magic, and then beyond that, they can bond with an animal, which is a much deeper connection than they have with just being witted. It's almost like they are two halves of the same soul from that point. It is a true life.
They feel the same things that each other feels. Like at one point, right, Fitz leaves his body multiple times. He leaves his body and then hangs out with the wolf.
Yes. And so before Fitz really understands what this is, and before he's really realized because he knows nothing, he's not been taught about this magic, he accidentally bonds with one of the puppies that Burrick has him sleeping with, like in the
beginning.
Yeah.
Because Barrick doesn't know that he's got the wit, but Barrick does.
Being witted it's considered very dirty and low, and it's to be discouraged. And Burrick was brought up believing that, and so he has tried to squelch that magic.
And unfortunately, I think because he squelched the magic, then Fitz did kind of go sort of dirty. Because there was like a period of time where he thought that he was a wolf, and he was like unclean and weird. Couldn't even think human thoughts for a minute.
Yeah, but I think that's what Burrick was trying to protect him from. That if you go too long sharing the mind of an animal, you forget your own identity. Yeah, when Burrick realizes that he's bonded with the puppy, sad things happen, and Burrick violently breaks up that relationship.
That was terrible. I was
horrible.
Like, did he kill that dog? And I thought that he killed that dog forever. Part of me hated him the whole time because he thought he killed that dog.
Yeah, we need to make sure that people have read the entire trilogy.
Seriously, because
not just the first book.
Yeah, because that realization that, oh God, he didn't kill the dog
changes
the way you feel about Barrick.
Okay, so anyways, people have had to hide their old blood for a long time. Now, there is a subsegment of people who live quietly, and like little pockets of them that hold true to their old blood ways and quietly hand down their traditions. They are worried about being persecuted, so they can't do it openly.
King Regal. Do you think that King Regal went after them because of Fitz? Or do you think he just did it because he's an ass?
I think it was definitely because of Fitz.
He killed all those people.
But in any case, we're jumping ahead, so we're just laying out the world right now.
Yeah, all right.
All right, so the other type of magic, the one that is supposed to be really only for those of noble blood and is a very much prized magic, is the skill. When you skill, you can affect the thoughts of others. If it's another skilled person, you can communicate with each other through your thoughts.
Provide strength to one another. You can sap strength from other people.
Yeah.
It's kind of evil when I think about it now.
Well, I definitely, so that was going to be one of my questions. Now Fitz, interestingly enough, has both magics, which is very, very rare. But assume that we're just, normal people.
Right.
And we're only going to be able to have one of the magic. Which one would you want?
A wit.
Me too.
Me too.
So, as Fitz is coming into his own as, a teen, and he's had this training as an assassin, there are these raiders that start attacking, and they're called the Red Ship Raiders because their ships are red. And
except for the one white ship.
and no one knows what they're after, but they just start attacking. And here's the thing, when they attack, they take these people, but it's not for ransom.
Well, in
People
the
can give.
beginning, they say you can pay this money and we'll kill them, or you cannot pay the money and we'll return them. And there's like a whole bit at the beginning where they're like confused, like, why would we want you
Right.
to return them? And so they didn't pay, and then they returned them, and they found out why that's not a great thing.
Right. So when the first time this happened was in the city of Forge, and so
Oh, that's why
based
they're
off,
called the Forged One.
yeah. So after that, they call these people that are returned the Forged Ones because they have been completely emptied of any humanity. They're not zombies, but
They're kind of like the fast zombies of like 28 Days Later.
right, but they're not decaying or anything. They still look, they're alive.
Right. Their hearts are pumping. They're not trying to eat people's brains.
Right.
They're trying to eat people sometimes, but not their brains.
They are completely motivated by basic needs.
Survival
If you
instincts,
have
yeah.
something they want, they will just kill you and take it. All right, so these red ship raiders have started attacking.
Right.
Chivalry is dead by this point. That has left
He fell off a
Verity
horse.
as the king in waiting, is using his skill. He's very strong in the skill, and he is using his skill to confound the sailors of the red ships to try to, redirect them so that they're not coming. And it's sapping all of his strength. And he doesn't really have time to rule because he's just wasting away. All of his energy is going trying to protect the kingdom. And Shrewd, for mysterious reasons, is also wasting away. And that leaves the rest of the kingdom primed for Regal to
We haven't
sweep
even
in.
talked about the Fool at all.
And so, well, let's just dive into it. So the Fool is sort of a gesture type to the king, very devoted to Shrewd, and is of an age with Fitz. They meet when they're both still boys.
So I did not get that at all. In the beginning, I thought the Fool was as old as the king. I don't know why I thought that, but for a long, long time, I thought that the Fool was like an older gentleman, like for a long, long time, like maybe the third book. And then finally, I was like, oh wait, he's young. Oh no, you showed me a picture of him from the book, and I was like, oh, he's young.
Yeah, so Robin Hobb just released the 25th anniversary edition of Assassin's Apprentice, and it is a beautifully illustrated book.
And there's maps, which is nice.
So I was showing it to Michelle, and I think the rendition of the Fool looks like Evan Rachel Wood.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And that's when Michelle realized that the Fool was young. So he's very quirky.
Sure.
Eccentric. A lot of the times he talks in riddles, and a lot of what he says doesn't really make sense, and how Shrewd came upon him is sort of kind of glossed over in the book. There is a religion where they believe in, they call it the White Prophet. They have like precognition. Fitz and the Fool kind of grow up together and they become fast friends. And
do you think they were fast friends? I felt like they didn't really have that close of a friendship. In the first like 2 books,
yeah, Fitz doesn't know what to make of them. He's
it's like almost
kid?
antagonistic, their relationship. Like
but
the Fool makes fun of him, but then they sort of bound together because they both suffer from Regal's influence.
And they both love Shrewd, and definitely.
They both love Shrewd, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe not fast friends.
I felt like it was
slow burning friends.
I thought it was like they were forced into friendship, but the Fool always kind of knew. So it was kind of like the Fool left breadcrumbs for Fitz.
So with this religion, and you have this White Prophet who comes. The White Prophet is almost like honor bound to use what he or she knows to correct the course of humanity. And the way that they do that is they need what they call a catalyst.
Right.
And
the changer.
Yes, that is sort of the one that they use to create that change and guide things the way that they feel it needs to go. And Fitz is who the Fool believes is his catalyst. All of that is going on, and at some point, Regal has been kind of has these machinations of trying to take power while everyone's distracted by this war.
Right.
And Regal, because he's the king, they decide that he needs a wife. And so...
Not Regal.
I'm sorry, yes.
Verity
needs a wife. And so Regal takes it upon himself to matchmake.
Well, he has to because Verity is too busy saving the kingdom from the red ships and doesn't have the time or energy to go find a wife because he's wasted away and not eating up in the tower. So he needs Regal to do it, right? He doesn't have the ability to do it himself. He doesn't want to do it either.
And I thought that he would botch this either intentionally or unintentionally, but instead he finds for Verity Kettrican.
Oh, we love Kettrican.
She's from the Mountain Kingdom.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the Mountain Kingdom is their idea of ruling the kingdom.
Right.
They don't call it a king, they call it the sacrifice. And they definitely believe in a servant mentality. So with Kettrican, Regal thinks that he has picked someone that, because of the huge cultural differences, the kingdom is never going to really accept her. And hopefully Verity won't really accept her. And that almost actually does happen.
I thought that he was going to marry her, Regal.
Oh, yeah, that was definitely his end goal.
Right? He was going to kill his brother and then marry his bride. Yeah. He's really good at selling the story. He's like a politician in that respect, right? So
right.
He takes whatever's happening and he spins it in such a way so that the story makes sense. That's how politicians work.
So they all go on this sort of ambassador trip type thing to the Mountain Kingdom.
Right.
And Fitz goes along as well to serve in his first
Well, that's right, because he's supposed to murder someone. Yeah. The brother. Right.
Because Regal has planted some bad information and they think that they've got to overthrow this Mountain Kingdom.
Because if he kills the brother, then when the father dies, Kettrican will be the ruler of both kingdoms then. If she marries, and they can pull the Mountain Kingdom into the 6 duchies. And it'll be 7 duchies instead.
But when Fitz gets there, he, these are his people. So I think there must have been a little bit of, he identified on some level with them.
Right, sure.
He immediately fit in there, learned the language very easily.
Kettrican tried to kill him. Like he
because she knew something was up.
He gets poisoned immediately.
Because she could tell.
Because Regal told her that he was there to kill her brother.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So she thought that he was there to kill her brother because that's what Regal told her.
Regal was just, oh God, so underhanded.
Both ends.
Every
middle. Oh my gosh.
But
then she poisons him, but then fortunately Shade warned him and gave him the antidote. He didn't get poisoned, but then he was completely outwitted.
Blindsided.
Outwitted completely.
Regal turned out to be way more competent than I ever gave him credit for.
So savvy. Like
I never
was
saw that coming.
Me neither. And usually I'm pretty good at spotting stuff, but I was like, wine was poisoned. Like it was like, oh, you didn't poison this, did you?
I didn't want to keep it in theme.
Oh yeah, and then you're like, and they're laughing about it, and then you're like, oh shit. And then then he dies. They kill him anyway.
I think you lost your...
The brother.
Yeah, so
dies.
The brother dies. Fitz feels terrible. And then the drowning. And we see the return.
Well, so he's weakened by the poisoning of the wine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we didn't talk about the dog. This is where the dog happens.
That's right. I wanted to give you this moment. Go ahead.
So then when so after he's poisoned by Kettrican, and before he's poisoned by Regal, he's chatting with the brother, and the brother...
He's a great assassin.
The brother... He's really nice. A horror show.
I think our drinks are hitting.
The brother takes him to meet his dogs because he's and whatever, and then he finds the puppy that we thought that Barrack had killed.
Barrack didn't kill him,
and he's like an old dog, and he'd already attached himself.
But he still remembered
to the brother. But he still remembers him, and it's such a sweet moment. And you're just like, oh, he's alive.
Barrack wouldn't have killed him.
And then Barrack, it was so sweet.
Michelle's literally tearing up right now.
I mean, puppies, man, puppies.
Nosy. The puppy's name was Nosy.
Yes, Nosy.
Yeah,
he's such a sweet dog.
So Nosy saves him.
So then it's worse because then when then Regal calls him to him, and I don't know why he goes to see Regal. That's a fucking stupid move.
He's a teenager. He doesn't know anything.
I don't know. He goes to, so Regal summons him, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna go see the guy that just poisoned me. And he goes in there, and then Regal kills Barrack almost, right? He hits Barrack over the head. We think Barrack is dead. And then he figures it all out, and he's like skilling. How does he skill to
the coterie?
To Verity.
Because we haven't even talked about Galen yet.
He skills to Verity and lets Verity know that Galen's going to kill him, because the whole plot was that Galen was going to kill him so that Regal could marry the chick and then become the king.
Right, so let's talk about Galen, which interestingly enough...
Wait, I was finished talking about the dog first.
Oh, okay.
We haven't finished the dog bit.
Do
Like,
tell.
This is a great part. But anyway, so then he skills to him. And so while he's doing that, when he doesn't have any powers, because he's sort of, because of Galen, we'll talk about Galen in a second. Because of Galen, he doesn't have the ability to like really skill anymore. So he's sort of like gone. And then he gets drowned by Regal. And then Nosy comes and pulls him out of the water. And then how does Nosy die?
He's old, and that was way
He's
too
old.
much for him.
That was all he could do, and he gave us.
So he just rallied one final heroic.
Oh, and then Nosy died.
And then Nosy died.
And Nosy died like 20 minutes after we get him back. He's dead already.
But he had a great life.
He did have a good life in the mountains.
So Regal's
Not
plot
the
was
farm, but the
foiled.
mountains.
Regal's plot was foiled.
Not really, though.
And now Kettricken is coming to meet her betrothed.
She's coming in to meet Verity. Well, let's talk about Galen.
All right, so as we said, Fitz has both magics, which is extremely uncommon. And no one's really showing him the way on the wit, but they are trying to teach him the skill. And so traditionally, the way the skill was taught was through a skill master. And the previous skill master, though, had died suddenly. And that role had passed to Galen, who was a shady son of a bitch.
But that was only because Verity fucked with his head.
Chivalry.
Chivalry.
No,
fucked
he
with
was.
his head.
No. We found out that this was.
Oh, that's right. The reason why he fucked with his head was because he was such a son of a bitch.
Yes, and had been in cahoots and had ties to Regal and his mother that I don't want to give away, because I mean I feel like we're giving way too much away for people who haven't read it yet. In any case,
Sure. If someone hasn't read it and they listen to this podcast, then like me, I'm so sorry, Iris.
Well, so Galen, but here's the thing. So when Galen,
so good though.
Interesting.
So good.
Interestingly enough,
Yeah.
you may not know this. I'm about to blow your mind.
Mm.
Accidentally, Galen's name in Swedish means mad, like crazy.
Oh.
Only it's spelled differently. It's Galin, which you don't know how it was spelled in the thing. And so in the Swedish versions of the book, they redid the spelling of the name so that it's clear that he's
crazy.
gay. Yeah, he's crazy. So yeah, he's nuts. And so it's sort of like the Dolores Umbridge of.
He legit is like a Dolores Umbridge,
Yes.
only doesn't have the manners.
As soon as he gets,
or the outfits.
Yeah, as soon as he gets into the role, he suspends training. Previously, there was
and then he says the kings, or Verity and Chivalry and Regal, he says that they're ready.
Right, and they don't get fully trained.
They're not ready. Yeah.
Because he's not really that great. He just has the knowledge, but as far as talent, he really doesn't have it. And previously, there was every 10 years or so many years, they would do like this casting call for people who might be skilled.
Right.
So that you could, because what you could do, especially to support someone in a position of power, you would form these coteries, is what they called it. And it were people who skilled and were bonded to each other,
Right.
and were able to share skill strength with each other, and it was this beautiful family type thing.
So Galen tries to make a coterie.
He's
Well,
tasked.
He does make one.
He's tasked because
Right.
now that they have these red ship raiders, it's clear that Verity, who's having everything drained out of him trying to fight them off, that he needs a coterie, and he perverts it. And instead of people being loyal to Verity, he is making them loyal to Regal instead.
Yes. He does. He's a real.
And Regal is very weak in the magic. And
yeah, he's not as strong as Verity for sure. Well, he's not very disciplined.
Right.
Regal. I mean, he's sort of like a drunkard, high all the time.
yeah, the pleasure herbs.
Pleasures.
Yes.
Oh, can we talk about the tea?
Spill the tea, Michelle.
The tea, like whenever he uses the skill, he gets really sick. And then he takes this tea.
Oh, the elder bark.
The elder bark tea.
Elf bark.
And then we find out later that ruins skill, and that's how they fucked with Chade. Those bastards.
Oh.
Took the skill from Chade.
Right, so Chade was, we find out, not just a random dude. He was actually the bastard half-brother of Shrewd. And because only noble blood are supposed to be able to skill, they had tried to suppress it in him by giving him copious amounts of elf bark.
They told him.
They
told Shade that when he uses the skill and he got sick, that he should drink the elf bark. But when he uses the skill and he drinks elf bark, it just suppresses skill.
But he thinks that it's to help you overcome the effects of using the skill. So he, is a proponent of it and tells Fitz
and Verity
that they should drink the elf bark.
So
Galen does nothing to disabuse anyone of this information.
Well, I don't know if Galen knows about shade.
Well, he does because he took all the scroll. Well,
never mind. Take all the scrolls. You're right. That's how they find out about the quarry.
Yes. So,
sure, yeah.
Is it irreversible?
No, it's not reversible. But I think like if they're really strong in the skill, they could sort of still skill, even though they did. And it depends on how much they drank. So like Shay drank a lot, right? But our main man Fitz only drank it when he did weird, crazy skill shit, which was only like maybe 6 times.
Right.
In the book.
But so after the failed assassination attempts, plural,
on Fitz's wife.
And Ketcherkin is coming back to Buckkeep to meet her true king, even though Regal is trying to sabotage that whole thing now. Verity has decided that he's fighting a losing battle. There's no way that, without a coterie, there's no way that he can keep doing what he's going to do. So he's devised a Hail Mary.
No, it wasn't him. It was Ketcherkin that came up with the plan for the...
Oh God, I love her so much.
It was Ketcherkin because she was trying to figure out what was going on with the Elderlings, because everyone talks about the Elderlings, but there's no real details. And it's so funny in the book how they say that the reason why there's no details, it's be like, why isn't there any details about cats or cows? Because everyone knows what a cat and a cow is. There's no use explaining it. But that's ridiculous because there's plenty of pictures of cats and cows. So... But anyway, so she does all this research on the Elderlings, and then she figures out
a map,
that there's a map, and figures out that in the past,
she's so smart.
The Elderlings help them get out of a jam.
Yeah, so it's called the Realm of the Elderlings. Obviously. And in the 6 duchies, Elderlings are these people from long ago,
right?
Who had like these mystical abilities, and nobody's really sure if they really existed, how much of it is legend, and how much of it is fact. But Ketcherkin does her research.
And it's such a sweet moment, too, because when she's talking to Fitz, she's basically saying that she's helpless and that Verity doesn't love her or care about her. He doesn't see her or take her seriously, doesn't respect her. And at the same time, when this is happening, Verity is essentially seeing everything that's happening through Fitz's eyes because he's scaling in through him to see. And so then he sees like the tears in her eyes, and he's like, "Tell her to come to me and tell me this right away."
Yes.
And then they get all dolled up for each other, and it's so cute.
And then they finally realize how perfect they are for each other. Because the thing is, Ketcherkin has been raised to be sacrificed. That's what being a ruler is. So she's not comfortable just coming to court and having pretty dresses and meeting with her ladies. I mean, she's there to get the job done.
Right.
And so she does her research. She finds this map that may be able to find where the Elderlings last were and maybe raise some dragons while they're at it.
Well, they don't know that they're raising dragons. They just know that they think the dragons are the Elderlings, but they don't know that yet.
Right, but they do know that there's, in the past, that the Elderlings could control dragons.
Oh, do they know that?
Maybe not.
I didn't know that they knew that.
Well, you've read it more recently than I have.
That was a surprise to me. I mean, that they were dragons.
Okay, yeah. So they just know she's going to seek out the Elderlings. Whatever powers they have, maybe they can help. So they set off to find them.
Verity goes.
Just Verity goes at first, yes. And then he's missing in action. And after he's gone for a long time,
then the shit really goes down.
Because then Regal is primed to take command. He's missing and presumed dead. So Regal's going to step in and take over.
Right.
Have we talked about what happened to Shrewd yet?
No.
Oh, let's talk about that. So, meanwhile,
back at the keep.
Back at the homestead, back at the farm, Shrewd has been growing more ill, very sick, and of course people think it's because he's old, but really it's because he is
being leeched.
Exactly. Yeah.
But let's talk for a second about him being old.
Okay.
Because I loved this part of the book. So back when Fitz was poisoned the second time, and as he's coming down from the mountain, he keeps talking about how he's old now. I'm like, he's 18, right? 17. How old he is now, and how he's so old, and how his life is never going to be the same, and he's sick, and he's weak, and whatever. And then he has the skill dream where he becomes the king and feels like what old really the fuck is. And he's like, holy shit, It could be so much worse. I'm fine.
Right.
And then he becomes fine after that. And I think it's interesting perspective because when I was younger and old people would complain about their whatever, I'd be like, oh, come on. You know, like that's just something old people do. But now that I'm older, I'm like, fuck, getting old sucks. You know what I mean? And I feel like it was like the opposite that happened for Fitz. And I thought that was genius bit of writing.
Yeah. That's pretty great.
It's pretty interesting. Anyway.
I love hearing you talk about it.
You're like, it's my favorite.
So eventually, the coterie who's been leeching the strength from Shrewd,
right?
Fitz finds out about it. There's like this kind of a skill battle, and because Galen did everything he could to prevent Fitz from really being able to master the skill. In fact, not only didn't teach him, but like put blocks in to make it difficult for him.
He could still. So I think Fitz was trying to get the king to hear that Verity was still alive because he was skilling through the king to Verity, but he couldn't do it because the leeches were there.
Yes.
And then instead of letting the king know that he was alive, they just fucking killed the king.
Yeah, they killed the king, and then Fitz, who is very strong, and who knows what he would have been capable of if he had been taught correctly and from a very young age. But in moments of, very, intense situations, he can skill very strongly, and he does, and ends up fighting back. But now he's been framed for the death of Shrewd.
Well, to make matters worse, then he decides, because he's an idiot, that he's just gonna fucking kill those guys. Yeah. So he chases them around with a knife, like around the castle or the keep or whatever, and then he cuts the one's throat in front of all of these witnesses.
Right.
So he's like basically killed two people.
Well, his grandpa just died.
Well, I know, but you don't. He's a fucking assassin. Like he doesn't know how to kill people.
Like with stealth.
Like I'm just gonna yell like a madman and like cut like I don't know.
Right. So that
gives the wolf influence. Like he gets the little beast thing happened.
So then that gives Regal all the proof he needs to lock Fitz up in a dungeon. He tortures him and eventually kills him. Now,
no, he doesn't kill him.
Well, as far as everyone knows.
Bear comes in and spits the seed in Fitz's face, and Fitz takes the thing and he eats it, and then he kills himself.
Right, because he's going to be hung for beast magic.
But we know that he's going to go walk right with Wolf like he did when...
Well, but before we get into that...
All right. We know he's dead.
Right. So they fake his death so that he won't be, executed for being witted and using his beast magic to kill the king. Now, what we haven't talked about is, so his first bond animal was Nosy, accidental. Right. And then Burrick, out of a fear of realizing what he is and that he'll be persecuted, and also having this deep-seated shame about wit magic and feeling like it is dirty and tainted. Right. He takes Nosy, ostensibly kills him, but we really find out that he gifts it to the Mountain Kingdom.
Takes him actually to a farm somewhere far away.
Yeah, legit took him to a farm. And
then the second one, what is his name? The second one, it's not the wolf.
Smithy.
Smithy.
He bonds with another dog,
and that dog is killed protecting Barrage from the other stable guy.
Yes, and so now after that, Fitz doesn't think he's going to bond with anybody.
Yeah. So then he's like, I'm out.
He's out. And then he happens upon a wolf who has been... Yeah, he's in a cage. He's starved, and he's just a pup. He's just a little pup. And Fitz knows that he's got to rescue him, and then they end up bonding.
Although he tries like hell not to bond.
But that is Night Eyes, who becomes his true companion and bond animal. And
the others were true as well.
Right, but they were innocent and young, and this is a true joining. Although later, when he does meet some of the old blood, have you heard? You don't know this, so I'm not going to say that.
I know. I mean, when he meets the old blood with the bear,
and they think that the way they bonded was not done correctly, but they didn't know any better. So when Fitz is given like a Romeo and Juliet type thing where everybody thinks he's dead, he gets buried, but really mentally his mind, his soul is being carried by Night Eyes.
Right.
And everybody thinks he's dead.
Well, because he is dead.
And his body is dead, but his soul is living in Night Eyes. And then after, enough time has gone by, the heat is off, Burrick and Chade dig up his body and they have to lure his spirit back into his body.
Right.
And then they take him out to the country so that he can learn to become human again.
Right. And that's essentially the end of the second book.
And then one thing that we haven't talked about is Patience. Patience. I love her so. So this is Chivalry's wife, and she was unable to have children. And so when she finds out that Chivalry has fathered a bastard before they got married, he never cheated on Patience. She, of course, is heartbroken.
Right.
And they're very much in love, and Chivalry feels horrible for how she must be feeling. And so they sort of, close themselves off into their country homes. And at some point after Chivalry dies, Patient comes to court, accidentally meets Chivalry, and there's no denying that Fitz is Chivalry's son because they look so much alike.
Well, she says that she came back for Fitz.
Yeah, she starts to kind of regret it. They meet on accident. Fitz doesn't know who she is.
Oh, that's right.
And when she sees, they meet in like the women's garden. And when she sees that he's not being taught anything, he's, nothing of culture that, Chivalry's son should be, she decides to take him in hand.
And that's why he gets taught the skill.
That's why, Patience pushes it, but also scribing. And all about the plants, and he's a very good. Turns out that he's very good at that.
Scribing before that.
I don't think so. I think she arranged that, and playing musical instruments for which he had no gift. And Lacey,
for sure.
And then Lacey, her handmaiden, the two of them are more like,
Lacey is the hidden gem. I really feel like she was underdeveloped in the book because she had so many little facets, and I hope maybe she comes back later, but she's so underdeveloped.
Well, there's so many characters though,
That is true. There are a lot of characters.
But in any case, Patience and her servant Lacey, who they're more like sisters than anything.
Right.
They have eventually have a very close relationship with Fitz, but they do believe that he's dead.
Yeah, well, because Patience is the one that took care of him after his body and made sure that it was put back together, which apparently saved him, because if she hadn't done that, then
he wouldn't have been able to been brought back. When they tortured him in the dungeon before they killed him, trying to get him to admit that he had killed Shrewd, he was very badly beaten, a lot of open wounds, and before they buried him, Patience lovingly tended to his body, sewed all of his cuts shut,
and paid for him to be buried instead of burned.
Yep. So. Right, yeah. If that's not the act of a mother's love, what is?
I don't know. I liked Patience. I'm going to be honest with you. I wanted Patience to get back together with Beric at the end. Like, I know it's fine how it ended. I'm fine with it. I was never a huge fan of Molly. She's fine. I like Molly, but I didn't need Molly to get together with
I cannot
Fitz.
stand Molly.
But and it's fine. Molly and Beric are fine, but I wanted Beric to, because Patience was his first love, and there was nothing holding them back now. Like, what? No.
Right. So Molly is Fitz's childhood sweetheart.
She's the ingenue.
And, they met when he was running wild in Buckkeep Town. Her father was a drunkard, and because of that, she has very little tolerance with men who drink. And of course, Beric is
a drunk,
an alcoholic. So,
right, yeah.
So she and Fitz, as they grow up, changes from a childhood friendship into their, a young love. But she has no loyalty. It's all about her. All right. So we have probably discussed the various plot points ad nauseum in a very circuitous way. So let's just kind of talk about some general themes.
Okay.
Now, obviously, Fitz doesn't really have a relationship with his father, but he has various people in his life that serve as father figures. He's got Beric, he's got Jade, he's got Verity, Shrewd.
No female, so really, Patience.
But, the reason why I bring up these father figures, it always bothered me that the way he thinks about Beric is that Beric, he was just another responsibility to him. When it's so clear to me how much Beric really loves Fitz, that Fitz, we're seeing it through Fitz's eyes, and he didn't feel that way at all. He felt like he was a burden. Beric didn't want to be having to deal with him. He just did it out of sense of duty and loyalty to Chivalry.
Right, because Beric was all about duty and loyalty. That was his whole vibe.
And I think that's why he was so susceptible to Shrewd's offer. When Shrewd sort of bound Fitz to him at a very young age. He's like scrounging around
Right.
in the, eating leftovers off the table from like some fancy dinner that they'd had. And Regal and Shrewd walk in, notice him scrounging, and Shrewd uses that as an opportunity to teach Regal that we have a choice with this boy. We could have killed him, or we can make him a tool for us. He strikes a bargain with Fitz, who's probably, I don't know, probably 8 at the time.
I feel like 8's probably, yeah.
And he's like, I will make sure that you are always well fed, not eating scraps off the table, and well clothed. In return, you will be loyal to me. Gives him a pin to sort of honor that commitment, and they make that pact. And from that point on, Fitz is fiercely loyal to Shrewd.
Right.
And Shrewd eventually did develop fondness and respect for Fitz. But I always was like, how can Fitz be so loyal, knowing he overheard that conversation? He overheard Shrewd telling Regal that he was going to use him. He was a tool to be used.
Right.
But I think he was just so starved.
Also, I think it was normalized. Because
not for food, but for...
Shade normalized that. Everyone normalized that he was a tool. That he was a tool became sort of like an accepted thing. Anything can be normalized if it's emphasized and reinforced enough. And I think that the idea that his whole purpose in life was to be a tool for the king was completely and utterly normalized. So much so that was natural. That's what's supposed to happen. That's who he was.
I think you're right. And it's sad, though. It's really sad.
Sure.
So with that in mind, each chapter of the book starts with like this little segment that's italicized, almost like it's like a little excerpt from...
That's not something I would have noticed from the audiobook.
Oh, okay. So at the very beginning of each chapter, when he's talking about history or what this plant means, it's italicized, and it makes it's clear. I'm assuming that it's meant to be like an excerpt from this published work that finally exists after Fitz.
I did not get any of that. I skimmed through that nonsense. I don't really care about those details.
Well, each of it sort of provides clues to what's about to be revealed in the story. Mm-hmm. So if you skimmed, you may have skipped over this part, but so one of them was talking about the man ceremony. Do you remember reading about that?
Yeah, where he gets his name. And I remember thinking when that part came up that they really skipped it because they're like, some chap gave him his name and let him keep it. And I'm like, who's that chap?
Yeah.
We don't know who that chap is.
Right. And what's his name?
We don't know.
Exactly.
They don't tell us. They're just like, yeah, some guy said, yeah, I'll support you in this ceremony. And I was like, well, why wasn't it Beric?
Well, so here's the thing. It never said. So with the man ceremony, which I think is a stupid name, I feel like she could have come up with something a little bit more.
Maybe the idea of it was just so mundane that she wanted to make it sound stupid.
Right. So the man ceremony, which is sort of like a bar mitzvah type thing.
Yeah.
It's like you have to have one man sponsor you, and then he has to get 12 others to agree that you are worthy of
a name,
of this name and being entered into manhood, sort of a thing. So it never says. It just talks about his own. It
doesn't say what the name is either.
So you have one person who nominates you, 12 people have to agree, then they give you a name. It never does say what his name is. It does say that it translates into catalyst. It does say that, but you don't know what his name is. So I've always been curious, and let's just theorize here, who put his name forward and who the 12 other men could be. I think the fool put his name in, or Chade.
But he knows who it is.
What makes you think he knows? I didn't get that he knew.
I feel like he knows who it was, and that's why I was like, it's some random chap. Because there didn't seem to be any mystery in the way that Fitz talked about it. The mystery was that it didn't tell us who it was or what his name was. But if it was something like Catalyst, then the fool would make sense.
Well, I hope it comes back up. I've not read the final trilogy.
Oh. But also, the fool is not a man. You said they were the same age.
Right. Well, I think the fool is like a couple of years older, though. They were boys together, but I think the fool was a little bit older.
Do you think the fool was already a man?
Well, it's just all I can think of. I mean, we've got the fool, we've got Beric, we've got Chade, we've got Verity, maybe Shrewd.
Those men weren't even involved. I can't imagine that they were.
And then the one dude who was like captain of the guard, that had a lot of respect for him. Maybe
Hans?
No, not Hans. He was in the stables.
Hans is the same age as him as well.
No, this was the
guy that killed Beric, killed the dog.
No, he didn't work in the stable. He was like one of the king's guard.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, okay. So anyways.
I don't know who this is.
I'm just very intrigued.
That was like a weird part where I was like, what is happening?
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll come up. If any of our listeners have theories about the convocation.
But it's interesting that you say that, because I didn't catch any of that stuff in the audiobook because I didn't see the italicized. And also, I want to talk about the narrator for a second.
Well, we're going to get to that.
Oh, we're going to get to that. All right. Well, wait.
Well,
so this is probably a good place for me to talk about something. The predestiny of all of the characters. Like, that's a huge theme. The fool is destined to be, like, he doesn't have a choice. He has to save the world, right? He doesn't have a choice. Then Fitz also, he's the changer. He doesn't have a choice. And every time he tries to go against it, like Barrack and Shade are like, you have to do this. It's your duty, your honor to do it. And Barrack is honor bound to do things. And it's almost like one decision that each of the characters makes, or it's made for them when they're born. And that's all that they can do. And they don't have the ability to outlive it or outrun it at all. That's just who they are. It's so depressing that none of them outrun that. They're all stuck with whatever that little pin is.
Yeah. Final thing I want to talk about is all the villains of the book. Obviously, there's Regal, and there's Galen, and the Red Ship Raiders. Can you think of any others?
So, villain in the book?
Those are the big three. Which one scares the shit out of you the most?
What about the coterie?
Well, I'd follow that.
Will?
I'd follow all of that under Galen.
I mean, Will was his
and
own.
Regal. They would have never done that on their own.
I know, but Will...
They were like cousins. You know, they could have been friends.
And all those evil guards.
Yeah, but all of those were under the direction of someone else. So, like, who do you think did the most damage to Fitz? Do you think it was Regal or Galen? I think it's got to be Galen.
Yeah, because Galen
almost made him kill himself.
The skill curse on him and almost made him kill himself.
It was like such deep psychological
trauma.
But then he had some serious PTSD from that torture
as well. More so, I think.
But forging is some scary shit too.
Forging? Well, no one forged him.
I know, but I'm just saying, in the book, what do you think scares you the most?
Oh, what scares me the most?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. What was I afraid of the most? I think the forged ones were pretty scary. Just the zombie, just the idea of losing your humanity. And even when we saw that happening sort of at the end of the series to Verity, that was kind of scary. You didn't know what was going to happen. I don't know what was the most scary. That one bad guy, you know, like when he gets captured as he's crossing the river, and there's that guy that captures him. You know that? Those guys were scary, those guards. There's a lot of mean people in this book.
Yeah.
A lot of evil shit went down. And even the good guys did some really shitty things.
I'm not sure you're ready for everything that's going to come up in the live ship traders.
In the live ship?
So the live ship traders are the next trilogy and my favorite of the series thus far.
Okay.
Okay, but anyways, back to Farseer. So you, as you mentioned, there was a couple of little things that you may have missed having it on audio versus the book. But what you gained was the narrator, who is Paul Bomer.
Okay.
Probably the only book I've heard him narrate. What did you think?
So at first, I thought he sounded a lot like C-3PO. But the more and more I listened, I was feeling like Stewie from The Family Guy, which was hard. It was hard for me. And I think the problem is that the character was so young. So I hear this like older British man from of a 6-year-old boy. So naturally I'm going to go Stewie, right? And so, like, it stayed with me for a long period of time. Like, I kept hearing things in Stewie's voice, which gives me sort of like I don't know. It was kind of funny when it shouldn't have been sometimes, because I could hear Stewie saying the things. But by the second book, I got over that. And I started to think about, okay, this is just him in the future when he's an old man telling me what's happening. But then having that perspective all the time kind of there, I lost the fear that he wasn't going to make it out. So, like, I was like, oh, he's fine. He's going to get out of this.
Well, I mean, we know that he's
going to make it out of this because he's the one telling me the story.
Right.
But sometimes when you don't realize that it's an older person telling you the story, and you don't have that perspective, it could still end.
Right. And you're saying that with the audiobook, you didn't get the italicized points, so it wasn't clear that this is a story being told by an old man.
It wasn't clear.
Recounting.
For a long time. And then when I sort of came to that conclusion, then it kind of took out the whole, this guy could die. Something terrible could happen to this character.
I hated the narrator for this.
Okay.
I think he has a lovely voice, and I'd love to hear him narrate some other things.
He's not Fitz.
Yeah, he's not Fitz.
He's too proper.
There's such a connect there for me because this is a rough and tumble kid. He grew up outside of society. Yes, he
Right.
is of royal blood, but it was made very clear that he did not belong at the high table.
I mean, for sure, this was a kid who ran with wolves.
Yes, and spent a lot of time on his own. Like I said, I haven't finished the series, but I have finished. So there's 5 trilogies in this realm,
Right.
and the first one is Farseer Trilogy, and it's the beginning of Fitz and the Fool and this
Right.
whole Six Duchies storyline. Next, it flips. We're in Jamelia and Bingtown and the Pirate Isles, and it's a whole different cast of characters, although there is some overlap. But you do want to read them in this order because it's the
Chronological,
timeline.
right.
Yeah. Then after the Live Ship Traders, which are my favorite, it flips back to the story of the Six Duchies with Fit, and it's the Tawny Man trilogy. After that, it flips sort of back to Live Ship, but it's about dragons.
Oh.
And then
The
after,
Elderlings.
yes, and then after that, it flips back to Fitz again, and I haven't progressed past the dragon
Why
books.
have you not done that?
Well, I'm afraid I won't like it as much because it's maybe too fantasy for me, where dragons are talking and.
I've read many books like that, and they're fantastic.
Well, this will be my first, so I'm just gonna dive in and do it. Also, they're not available on any of my library apps. They're either ebooks or audio. At least the first one's not. And this isn't a trilogy. It's 4 books. What would you call that?
A quadrilogy?
Quadrilogy. We just made it
a quadrille.
Yeah.
A series.
I could think a quadrille is a dance.
Why don't we just call them a series?
Okay, so in
a series of 4 books.
So in any case, I do need to dive in. I think I've been putting it off, but I'm just gonna do it. Maybe we could do that one together. We'll start at the same time.
Oh.
So I'm gonna wait for you to catch up. And
that's gonna take me a while.
That's okay because
I've got 12 books to get through to catch up.
That's okay because I've got other stuff to read too.
Yes, so do I.
So when you're ready, we'll do those 4 books together. Okay. So anyways, but yeah, he was way too cultured and there was a disconnect. He didn't, the whole thing, which is a problem for you, is that it was told from this one point of view.
Right.
But the voice didn't match the character.
It didn't feel like Fitz. Yeah.
All right. So that's
I'm
that.
with you there.
That's that. Now, looking ahead, do you have any theories? Any thoughts or like, ooh,
theories.
I bet this.
About what's happening?
Like they didn't wrap up in this book, but you think
they wrapped all of my stuff up. I mean, except for
the man ceremony.
The man ceremony, they didn't. I don't fully understand how Fitz came to be with the king.
The Fool.
The Fool. The Fool.
Mm-hmm.
Fitz. Yeah.
We're on drink number 2.
But no, I don't really have any. Do you have any? What theories do you have?
Well, I don't want to say because I can't tell which theories are based off of how far I've gotten.
You're like, I don't know which ones are which book.
And this is something that you really only get in fantasy, and it's why I love fantasy so much. Everything's series now. Which can be frustrating as you're waiting on the books to be released. But there's so many clues peppered in, and a throwaway sentence that means nothing at the time that you read it. Later, you find out has huge significance. And maybe that is part of the beauty of waiting on the next book is all of the theories that you start coming up with and you reread it. It's like you're studying for a test,
I think the binging is better. Same with television series. Like if you binge a television series,
then it's just being spoon fed to you.
You're immersed in that the entire time, and you just don't come up for air. It's the same thing with the series of books. If I read one right after another, I'm immersed in it. I'm in that realm, in that kingdom, in that land, in that world. All of those things are happening. So much so that I start to think like the characters or talk like the characters because I'm so immersed in it. If you read one at a time, it's like watching an episode a week and you sort of can check out.
For me, if I had my druthers, I would find out about a series that's meant to be a trilogy, for example.
Right.
I would find out about it shortly before the last book is going to be released.
Right.
So you don't have to wait too long. Because obviously, my number one, we talked a little bit about my top 3, and this is number 3. Robin Hobbs is number 3 for me.
Right.
Wheel of Time is number 2. And number 1 for me, of course, is Kingkiller Chronicles. I love that I got into the first book, Name of the Wind, right when it got released.
Right.
But I didn't have to wait very long for Wise Man Feared, right? They came out pretty close together.
Right.
And it was an endurable wait. And while I was waiting, I was able to formulate where I thought it was going and go back and reread passages, because one of the most beautiful things about that book is that it starts off telling you, like when he is meeting the chronicler at the very first night one,
Right.
he's like, I can tell you my story in 8 words. And he was like, something, 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 something. And I was betrayed, and so already I'm thinking, who betrayed him? It was great. And then the second book came out, and then you find out even more. And some theories progressed, some disproven, and then new theories were spawned. And now, book 3, where's book 3?
Honey, I am waiting for it too.
Yeah, and it's just,
we all are.
It's so hard. So if I had my druthers, the books would all, before the publishers would let them release it, all the books of the series are finished.
Oh.
And then they release them 1 year apart.
That would be ideal.
That would be ideal. So I love the spirited conversation. I'm glad that you took the leap and that you are immersed into this world. We do need to wrap up, though. And so with that in mind, Iris, what do you have for us for a bookend?
Okay.
I thought you were ready.
I mean, I thought so too.
Right?
She did promise that
She was
would
throwing some shade at us.
Oh! Nice.
Okay. For my bookend this podcast, I don't know if we have time, but there is a trivia to see how well you know.
Oh, it's trivia.
Yes.
April is so competitive.
Are we going to go like Family Feud?
Please no. We can't. No panging on the table.
Okay. All right. I mean, it's cool. Whatevs.
Just
totally
be like,
cash.
Just be like,
We're just going to play a fun game.
just say the answer. Just relax.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right.
This is literature pop quiz for the Farseer trilogy.
Okay.
And this one is specifically on the Assassin series, okay?
Okay.
It's Deep Love versus most recent reading.
This is a tough. This is
Also, my memory is
This
for
has
shit.
been considered tough.
Love wins.
Love always wins.
Okay. The book begins with Fitz being left at Moon's Eye by his grandfather. Who is the king of the 6 Duchess?
Shrewd.
King Shrewd, okay.
We'll call it a tie.
Where does Fitz spend his first night?
Stable.
Okay.
Shit.
So in a
Way
stable
for
with
the
Burke's
question.
dog. Okay. What is Burke's dog called?
Is Burke's dog?
Oh,
that's
the mama dog.
Nosy's mom.
Her name?
So you got names as Nosy, Vixen, Smithy, and Leon.
Leon.
Vixen.
Vixen? Okay.
Was it Vixen? I didn't know. And it wasn't Smithy or Nosy. 50-50.
What is the name of Shrewd's first wife?
Oh.
It's not.
Okay.
Do you know the name of the second wife?
I don't
do.
either.
I'll give you
Desire.
it's a multiple
Desire?
choice.
Is hers. Yes.
Oh.
But the first wife is.
Constance, diligence, desire, or patience.
It's not patience. It's
Constance.
not desire. It's got a Constance.
Okay.
Oh, these are good ones.
How did Shrewd's second wife, Desire, die?
Oh, she overdosed on pleasure herbs.
That's right, she did.
Overindulgence in intoxicants? Okay.
There you go.
Maybe, come on, give it to her.
Oh, no, it is. That's what it says. I just want to make sure.
I was like, come on.
She hasn't read it. She's got to check the answers.
Who was the king of the Mountain Kingdom?
Oh.
Joffron, Sacrifice, Yod, or Rusric?
Sacrifice.
The
They're
first-
all sacrifice.
Yeah, the what was the first name?
Joffron.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
They're all sacrifice. I'm just saying.
The young Fitz made friends in Buckkeep Town, but what did they call him?
New boy.
Oh,
What is the relation was Shade to King Shrewd?
Brother.
half brothers.
They were
Half
brothers. 'cause he was a bastard. They're still brothers.
What is the name of Verity and Kettrikin's first child?
Dutiful.
Sacrifice.
Well, both are there. Sacrifice,
It's
chivalry.
dutiful. I will bet you $1,000.
Shit.
So which answer?
Yeah, sacrifice would have been. No, sacrifice.
Okay.
Ketchikan?
We're gonna bet $1,000.
We're not going to bet $1,000. I am not a betting woman.
Okay.
What is the answer?
It's dutiful.
I'll tell you in a minute.
Shit.
It's dutiful.
She's like freaking King Killer Chronicles over here, withholding information.
Why did Regal declare loyalty to Kettrikin and her unborn child?
Why did Regal?
Because he'd been skill commanded.
He didn't. Fitzgill imprinted it on
There.
him.
Yeah,
That's
that
what
one.
She said.
Okay.
She said it right.
I don't even need the choices. Because you know what? This book has been skill imprinted on
See,
my
all
heart.
The answers are right. Oh, okay. So who was the king of the Mountain Kingdom? Was Eot?
Oh,
We were both
I
wrong.
missed that one. Yeah.
It was the
I'm
brother's name
sorry.
was Joffrey.
And
And
no,
I'm
the Ruskin was the
sorry.
brother.
She was right.
About what?
Why? What's the name of Verity and Ketchkin's first child? It's Sacrifice.
That is bullshit.
No, it's not bullshit. The baby died. The baby that died's name was Sacrifice.
I wasn't thinking about the baby who died.
Huh?
Did they name it?
They did. They named it Sacrifice.
Ooh, I owe you
Clearly.
$1,000.
We did not
You should have shook my hand on that. Oh, pride goeth before a fall.
And that's the end of the bookend.
All right.
That was
pretty.
intense.
That was a pretty awesome bookend.
Who won though?
I mean, clearly you did.
Thank you.
Oh.
You're so generous.
I mean, love always beats.
But you loved the book too.
I liked the book.
You liked the book.
I mean, I don't know that I would say I loved it.
What rank would you put it?
In like my list of
Fantasy, only a fantasy.
I mean, most of my favorites are fantasy, to be fair. So
that's not very exclusionary.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
let's revisit this when you finish Live Ship.
Okay, we'll revisit it then.
All right. Well, I think this has been a very important chapter to me. And I'm glad we had the opportunity to do it. If you listened to the entire thing and haven't read the books like Iris,
I'm
hopefully
so sorry.
you feel
so sorry. You're gonna read it now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to
because it's gonna be the topic of like many conversations going forward. I feel like.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this chapter of the podcast. And until our next chapter,
Why don't you put a bookmark in it?
We'll put a bookmark in it.